Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Monomyth Diaries, a podcast where ordinary people get to share their hero's journey. I'm Mandy.
And I'm Karen, and we'll be your hosts.
We'll discover powerful insights, critical moments of growth, and much more.
Thanks for joining us. We all have a monomyth to share, and someone out there needs to hear it.
Welcome back to the Monomyth Diaries, where it's a take what you like and leave the rest podcast.
Thank you for joining us. I'm just going to quickly recap our last episode with Sarah. Sarah had shared about growing up with parents who battled addiction and how that has shaped her journey so far. We ended on her marrying her husband Roy at the age of 18. Sarah, welcome back to the show. Can you take us through what life is like now that you're married?
Sure. So I got married at 18. My husband was 19. We had a beautiful ceremony in Carmel, California, right on the cliff of the ocean. It was just beautiful. He had finished the college and I had stayed home, and we got pregnant with our first child when I was about 20. So we had a couple years alone before that. Marriage was rough. I didn't have great examples growing up, and I was just kind of winging it. We enjoyed each other's company. I just held down the house, and he went to work, and we only had one car. We didn't have a whole lot of money, so we spent a lot of time just together on the weekends doing things, card games, things like that. It was peaceful. It wasn't extravagant, but our first years of marriage were peaceful. During that time, my parents' marriage was falling apart. As we were building mine, my parents' marriage of 25 years was dissolving. My dad, his health continued to decline further and further. He was a diabetic, and he didn't take care of himself in that regard. And he was also back to abusing prescription painkillers. This had gone on for several years, and my mom at this point wasn't also an alcoholic. So now they're synced up on their addiction. So my mom kind of goes off the deep end with her alcoholism. She is going out every night. She's partying, and she's meeting men. At that point, she starts an affair. And my dad is too sick to care for himself, and he's left in their home where they live to, I guess I call it rotting away. I mean, I couldn't get over there often, but when I did, I felt like he was just rotting.
It must have been hard to watch, especially because y'all were so close.
We were. I just felt like, though, at this point, even though we were so close, I didn't really know him in this weakened state because I had never seen him like this before. He was always very strong, even in addiction. He was very strong, very social, very just high functioning. I had never really seen him like this. I felt like he could do anything as a child. And so to see him this week and hurt from my mom was very difficult for me. And instead of drawing closer to him, I sort of withdrew emotionally.
You're also processing.
Yes, and not really knowing I'm processing it. I kind of have a major flight or fight reaction to a lot of things, and it has not served me very well, to be honest. I usually take the flight mode, and so I don't process a whole lot. I have a lot of unprocessed trauma.
Did you say you were equipped?
No, during this time I was not equipped to handle anything that was put on my plate. So at this point, my parents had moved from California to Texas. They had sold their property in California and said, why don't you guys come with us? And since my husband had graduated college, we didn't really have much going on. And I feel like at this point, I was still, even though I had married Roy to get away from them, I felt very codependent. And I think it's because my dad had always been one to help me. So we came to Texas with literally nothing. We just had our car and our dog. We were 20. I moved here when I was 7 months pregnant with Sophie, so 17 years ago. So then Sophie was born, and my dad's health continues to decline. My mom continues to party. And then eventually I make the decision to move my dad into my house.
Are your parents still married?
Yes. They actually have never divorced. My mom is considered a widow. So my dad moved in with me, and I cared for him for the last 3 years of his life. During that time, my sister, who, if I was 21, 22 during those times, my sister was 10, 11, 12. She would also live with me on and off. My mom was not a functioning caregiver. And I also have a younger brother who was also caught in the midst of this. And I feel like he really just got the short end of the stick because my sister was the baby. And so everyone's going to look out for her, but no one really looked out for him.
So you're 20, he must have been about 15?
15. Yeah, we were 5 years apart.
Who's your older brother in all of this?
My older brother really got out. He moved to San Antonio.
So your whole family did move to Texas, but not necessarily stay together.
We didn't stay together, not at the same time. So we had my dad living with us, and that's kind of where the resentment started to set in between my husband and I, and our relationship started to form some cracks. I think the biggest one for him, just from talking about it since then, was that I didn't ask if my dad could come. I just made that decision. I thought that they had a great relationship, and my dad was like my best friend when I was a kid. So yeah, of course, like my dad needs somewhere to be and to be taken care of. Like it was just a non-issue for me. But looking back, I see like where was that conversation with my husband who also lives there. So in that happening, my husband was resentful and was not very nice to my dad. And that hurt me. We were both quietly building some tension and resentment. We kind of left this peaceful, quiet life and kind of moved into a lot of chaos. At that time, our second child was born. Our kids are 22 months apart. So I had a 22-month-old and a newborn, and I was taking care of my drug-addicted, sick dad.
And can I ask, what was your relationship with your mom like at this point? If dad's living with you, and I know you said you didn't ever have much of a relationship with her, and she's drinking a lot, but they're still married.
Yeah.
So what is that like for you?
It was a very love-hate relationship. I almost felt like I was using her because she would occasionally pick me up and take me to the grocery store or just help me with Sophie for an hour. You know, to be honest, after Sophie was born, I had postpartum depression, and she helped me quite a bit during the first 2 weeks of Sophie's life. And she would just cohabitate in my house with my dad and was okay. But then she would go off or bring a boyfriend by or get into a fight, and then it was back to hating her again. So it was very just
roller coaster.
Yeah, it was very much a roller coaster. Like I wanted a relationship with her at that time because I felt like I was finally realizing why she was the way she was when I was young. Like being so quiet, being, just staying at home, taking care of the kids, things like that. I could see how she made some of the decisions that she made when I was young at that point, and I was really finally becoming relatable. There was a time when I had called my mom and I was crying, and I said, I can't do this anymore with dad. I'm tired. And instead of helping or being there, she said, now you know how I feel. And it was that moment that I thought to myself that my relationship with her is over. That it won't ever be what I want it to be. It will never be what she wants it to be. It will never just be ever again. That response to me just showed me that she wasn't looking for anything from me other than to take the burden of my dad off of her plate so she could go drink and do whatever she wanted. She didn't really actually care for me as her daughter, because I was looking at my daughter at the time and in the back seat, and I'm thinking, how can you tell your daughter, how can you wish on your daughter the things that you went through? And I don't doubt her that she had resentment from his drug use.
How was Roy handling? Because I don't know how much he knew about your parents before. Now they're staying with you guys. Now it's in his space.
Here's a front row seat.
How was he handling?
We didn't talk.
So, the elephant in the room.
Yeah. That's very much the foundation of our marriage, and it allowed for a lot of resentment to creep in. So it was not talked about. My dad was to the point where he was going to move back to California to live with the cousin who I also had lived with. At this point, he was addicted to fentanyl, was his drug of choice, and they were patches. And this was before kind of the laws came into place where it made it really hard to get it even prescribed. I mean, his doctor was just prescribing it all the time to him. I would call his doctor and just beg him to stop filling this prescription. And I was in such denial, though, up to that point of just him even abusing it, that I feel so dumb looking back. They would come in patches, boxes of 3 patches. And he would say, it washed off in the shower. I need another one. I was like, okay, because at this point I had to hide them. I had to lock them up. I was like, okay, let me go get you another one. he was like chewing on it. He would chew on them. These are strong. Fentanyl is very strong. Like people die like all the time from this. So how he managed to build up that much of a tolerance is just crazy to me. But that's what he was doing. I was so naive to it. This is why he was always so forgivable. He struggled so hard with putting me in that position that he would cry to me a lot saying, you know, I'm so sorry that I do this. Like, I don't want to be like this. So he was always so easy to forgive.
I'm sure he felt terrible.
He did. I know he did.
He was fighting a battle.
Yeah, he was, for sure. And then to meanwhile, to not talk about this with my husband that all this was going on. Looking back, it was like, oh, I'll just work through it. I'll just work through it by myself. But it was just building this complete mound of just horse crap between us.
Just felt very alone, especially with what your mom said to you.
Speaking of alone, I know at some point as a little girl you said that you got interested in the church and your mom got super involved in the church and you moved from California to Houston. I think at some point you shared with us that you started attending church here locally. Is that correct?
I did. So, as a young married person, I had found a great church in California, and they had them all over the West Coast. It was called the Jesus Movement in the 70s. Everything that I wanted in Christianity, this was it. It was a very hippie, no legalism, very just much Jesus loves you, you know, just that. And it was what I craved. It was everything that my mom wasn't. It was everything that I felt in those sprinkles that I knew was it for me. So I had started attending in the city that I was from. Moving here to Katy, I had found that they just planted in Katy. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna go check it out. And it was great. I had fit right in. It was still very much just simple Jesus movement of the 70s. So I had built up a lot of friendships there. I had met an amazing woman named Patty who has been in my life ever since that time period, who is just a beacon of wisdom for me. And I had also met some people who absolutely destroyed my life during that time period. I had become very involved and I had dedicated about 9 years of service to that church. I was helping the pastor's wife lead women's ministry. I was leading the cleaning ministry. I was just there in leadership at this church. Fast forward 9 years and some things start to unravel within the leadership of this church, and that there is some money not accounted for. Things weren't adding up, and the pastor and his wife were confronted about it, and it was just a huge fallout. There were also allegations of mistreating children, and one of them was my own. I've never been in a situation where you have to believe somebody over your child at that age. I didn't know what to do. I really didn't, because I had looked to these people for growth and guidance, and I really felt like at the time they had really shaped who I was. And that was probably a mistake, letting people shape who I was and not God shape who I was. But I was really just clinging to these people to kind of show me the way. So our relationship had completely dissolved in the worst way possible. To top it off, my husband and I were going through a lot of marital issues from all the compounded resentment.
So she blamed you.
Yeah. It's like if your husband's cheating on you and they're like, well, you need to have more sex with him. That type of blame. Instead of trying to see, okay, what is going on in this marriage? Like, what are the lacking qualities? From those two instances, from the mistreatment of my child, the relationship with this pastor's wife, and then the funds not being accounted for, I had lost all faith in church at that point, and I just decided to never attend church again.
But you've maintained that relationship with Patty.
Patty is an exception. Patty was legit. She kept a relationship with me through, it has probably been like 12 years, I guess, since I've been to church or have even seen her. And she texts me every day. And she texts me the same scripture that she texts her daughters. So she loops me into the morning text with her daughters every day for the past 12 years. There hasn't been a day that I haven't heard from her. And she has never been a judgmental person at all. So if there was one person from that church that I needed, it was her.
And I wanted to ask you, when you started finding church, because you mentioned your dad had passed away after living with you for 3 years, where in that timeline, in the 9 years where you were with that particular church, was all the stuff with your dad happening?
It was so my dad passed away, and then I found the church.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the amount that you're dealing with at this point in your life.
Yeah.
It's a lot that your relationship with your husband is dissolving. Your dad has passed away. You no longer have a relationship with your mom. You've lost all the relationships that you have with your church. That you have a lot going on. What's keeping you going at this point?
Trauma. Literally, I can run so well on trauma. It's just a blind day to day. Like the lights are on, but nobody's home. I'm just waking up and doing routine with my kids and going to bed.
Survival mode.
Yeah.
How was your relationship with your kids? Well, all of this is going on.
Right, because at this point, you and Roy have separated.
Yeah, close to. I would say within the next 6 months or so after I had left this church, Roy and I decided to separate. During this time period, I have a lot of blank memories where I don't know what I was doing when I was doing it. I was literally just surviving. So with my husband at this point, we're just like roommates. He gets laid off. And so I decide I need to go to work because we were living beyond our means at this point, and we have this mortgage to keep up. So I had never worked at this point. I get a job at a nursing home working the night shift, and that disrupts our marriage far more than anything else because it just continues to drive away. So now I'm not even home sleeping in the same bed at night, where that was maybe the one thing that forced us to like look at each other, talk to each other, right? Is when you get in bed with that person. That last remaining sliver is now gone because I chose to work at night thinking this is how I'm gonna help. Looking back, a lot of my problems have come from just me feeling like I need to do. I need to do. I need to keep going, when really it just ruins everything. So our relationship was non-existent, and I had opened up a credit card bill one time and I had seen that he had registered for like Match.com, and I was devastated. And so from that moment on, instead of thinking, okay, how do I fix this? Like how do we repair what we've done? I took that as a chance to say, well, I'm gonna hurt you 10 times more. And it just opened up like to a year and a half or so of just who can hurt who more. And that's really when we separated.
And at this point, you guys hadn't really had a big conversation about
Nothing. We had no conversations about anything. So we had separated, and I'm still having to work at this point because, of course, now I'm the only one responsible for these bills.
So you stay in the house with your kids.
No, we lost that house. We couldn't afford to stay there anymore, and we had to sell it. And thankfully, we sold it before it foreclosed. So we had kind of went our separate ways. He went to an apartment. I went to a small townhouse. I found a lot of peace there despite what was going on because it was right on the Terry Hershey Trail. I would walk it like every day, and I really enjoyed it. So we separated, and it was just very back and forth the whole time. Like we would be okay, let's fix this, and then something would happen, and then we would and then not fix it, and so he would come back and then leave. So I know my kids were suffering a lot during that time, and I don't think I was mentally there for them like at all. I was just waking up, going to work, coming home, and just make sure that they had food on the table. They could not ask anything else from me. I couldn't give anything else. I kept telling myself I was doing all that I could and that everything was going to be fine. In the meantime, I was not healthy mentally. I was in survival mode, but I was also partying a lot, and I had started drinking a lot, and I had started doing drugs. So at this point, everything that I had not wanted from my parents came full circle, and I feel like I've turned into every part of my parents that I didn't want at this point. My mom partying, my dad doing drugs. Like I felt like I had turned into every part of them at this point. Like I had failed miserably. At this point, my dad was dead, so my mom moved from Texas to Georgia to kind of start over. And I didn't really see my brother much after that because I didn't have a relationship with my mom, so I never really went to Georgia. My sister lived with me off and on at this point because she didn't want to go to Georgia with my mom, and she didn't really have anywhere else to go. So she lived with me and then would go live with my mom. My brother was diagnosed bipolar some years after my dad passed away. We found this by him. My mom was dating a guy who moved in with her. My brother was living with them, and he was an adult. He was over 18. I don't quite remember his age, but he said, your son. He was like one of those very hard, like, your son's adult. He needs to get out. Like, he needs to get a job or get out. And I don't think they understood the depth of his mental illness at that point. So they kicked my brother out, and he had to get an apartment. He was on like disability because he had a back surgery at like 16. This kid had a back surgery, so he was on disability. So he just got whatever apartment he could that took his whole paycheck, pretty much his disability paycheck, and he didn't work. So I knew somebody who worked at Home Depot, and they had called me and they said, "Hey, your brother came in and he bought some really weird stuff. He bought like this box cutter, some candles. It was just weird." So when he's checked on, he had slit his throat, and that was his first attempt. He survived, but that was when they diagnosed him, because he had heard voices that told him to do it. So if my relationship wasn't over with my mom before that, I hated her with every ounce of my being from that moment on, because she kicked him out, and it led to that. It was really hard for me to even look at her or speak of her name or anything after that. And I've never felt like hate like that in my entire life. So he was in the hospital for a while. He needed a lot of blood. And when he came out, my mom broke up with that guy, and they moved to Georgia. So 2017, my mom is not getting him treatment for his bipolar. He's not taking his meds like he's supposed to. I don't know how it happened, but my brother had convinced my mom to let him buy a gun. And I don't know if she thought, okay, at least he's showing interest in something, because I get that. I've been through this with my daughter. When you have a child who's mentally ill and they finally show interest in something, you want to give that whole world to them, because they're showing interest and you want them to find something that they love. So he somehow convinced her that, like, I want to go shooting at a gun range. I don't know what was going through her head, but she purchased a gun for him. And he was showing weird signs of packing up a backpack and like walking places. We later thought that maybe he was looking for places to do it. He eventually just did it in his room with his door closed, and my kids were there. I was at the point where I was separated from my husband and I desperately needed help, so I let my mom keep my kids during the summer so that I could work. And it's probably the biggest regret of my life that I had to depend on her. Like, I should have just quit my job. I should have just lived under a bridge rather than do that. But I let my kids go there for the summer when this happened, and my mom took them out to go to the store and came home, and my brother's door was shut with a note on the door that said, take the kids next door. Don't open my door. So my mom did that. My mom took my kids next door, and she called me, and I didn't believe her at first. I just didn't believe her when she called me, because I thought, well, why are you calling me and not calling 911? I had to like convince her to call 911. I called my husband and I said, I need to get to Georgia. I said, Jacob, it's dead and our kids are there. And so he said, I'm coming right now. And he drove me through the night from Texas to Georgia to get to our kids. And that was really a defining moment in our separation, because it was the only time that we were really able for the first time to set everything aside and just be there for each other. Because he was like the only person, that I had. And I don't even know how it was many years, because we didn't have the money for plane tickets. We didn't even have money for gas to get all the way to Georgia. And he had borrowed the money from somebody. So we got to Georgia, we got to our kids. Our kids were okay. Our kids were with a neighbor. They didn't know what had happened. They thought that Jacob had just gotten hurt and went to the hospital. And so we had to tell them that he passed away. We didn't say why. And we had the funeral for him. Everything happened very fast because everybody kind of needed to get back to work, I guess. I don't know, like life. It was just weird. We had his funeral in Georgia, and I came back and I went to work the next day. And then a week later, Harvey hit, and we lost everything in that townhouse. Another little sprinkle moment. A week after burying my brother came home, Roy at that point had come back to my house, which was the townhouse. We were living together. So it just, everything just happening within like a short week. And water was up to probably my chest in our house. And we had to get our kids and we had to get out. So we walked that way with water up to my chest with our kids to the end of the street to a CVS. And there was no water on the ground there. And they were picking up people and taking them to the local high school. Well, the only way you could get there was on a flatbed. So we sat with our kids like really tight on us on the back of the flatbed and drove to this high school. And then from the high school, they said, okay, everybody has to go to the George R. Brown Convention Center. Like, we're busing everybody. So we just got there enough just to get something to eat and change our clothes, and then we were bused to the George R. Brown. We are, it's packed at the George R. Brown Convention Center. People are stealing stuff. People are stealing shoes. If you take your shoes off and set them down, somebody will swipe them. Just a really not safe environment. And we found a round table, and we got some cardboard boxes, and my husband put a wall up around the table, and our kids got in like underneath it, like it was like a makeshift fort. And so our kids slept, and we stayed up. Like, we kind of took shifts. Like, he would lay down, I would stay up and watch to make sure they were safe, and then we would switch. Well, behind us there was this really old lady who was kind of doing the same thing with her family. And at one point when we had switched shifts, she called me over and she's like, that man that you're with, he loves you so much. And I was just like, I know. So like, why is it so hard? You know, is that I just like, at that point, I just poured out my heart to this lady who didn't even know me. Like, I told her everything that was going on. And she said, I don't know why everything is happening to you like this, but you just need to know the only thing that you need to know is that man loves you. I can tell. I've been on this earth for a long time, she said, and I can tell. I said, okay. And I just accepted it then. I had just stopped fighting. I didn't want to live how I was living anymore. I didn't want to party. I didn't want to drink. I didn't want to cope the way I was coping. I just wanted to be with this man, and I wanted our family to be happy and healthy. And it wasn't too much longer after that we had both just come to the decision. We were sitting in the car because we were tired of fighting in front of the kids, so anytime we had to talk, we had to go somewhere.
Oh, I love that.
So we were sitting in the car, and it was just a very non-profound moment where we just said we don't want to do this anymore. Like, we want to be married to each other. This needs to stop. We want to stop. And we both stopped that day. And just never looked back.
They stopped, meaning stop hurting each other.
Stop hurting each other, yeah.
And move on from the past.
Yep.
Leave the past in the past.
That was the big one, because we could stop hurting each other, but our problem was that we couldn't get over the past. So then that would lead to more hurt, and then it would just create this cycle. And I think I was the bigger issue with this one because I could not move past him being on that dumb dating site, even though I had done far worse during the time that we were separated, just to like prove it to him that like, oh, I'm gonna do this if you're gonna do this. But I could not move past that at all. And I could not move past the way that he had treated my dad when he was living with us. And so I knew for that moment I had to forgive this man for those things that he asked for forgiveness. Like I had to, and I had to never bring it up again in that way or hold him to it or anything like that. Because if he can forgive me for the things I've done, and then I should be able to do the same.
I love that when you guys have disagreements, you don't do it in front of the kids, because one of the things you said in the previous episode was you saw your parents do that constantly. And it really does shape you. You took it with you, right, into your relationship. So that's a great way to start showing your kids that, you don't have to fight. Yeah, I love that. Are there any other tools or things that you're using now with Roy, moving forward?
So definitely communication is something that we have learned. Just getting married so young, you can't expect that person to be the same person they are when you get married, at 18 versus, 40. He's 40 now. And I'm learning to appreciate that. So I'm learning to love the things that he loves and not necessarily participate, but like just appreciate that he loves that thing and communicate with him and talk to him and like, hey, something's bothering you. You have to tell me. So we've almost gotten annoying with it. Like our kids find it like super annoying. But I'm like, no, you guys have no idea what we've been through. Like, just like trust the process. Like, let us do this, okay? Because your mom and dad were a hot mess. So it's just really just communicating for sure.
And now your relationship, it sounds like it was completely transformed from that moment on.
Completely. I actually, love him more now than I did when we got married. I think I loved when we got married, but I felt like it was out of necessity. And then how blessed am I that God took that necessity and turned it into something that just transformed my entire life. Even though it was bad, that period, there was so much growth there as a person where after that moment, I feel like I finally shed my parents' characteristics. I knew I was completely different after that.
That's a nice way to say it. You shed your parents' characteristics. I love that.
So profound. Yeah, parenting, marriage, everything. I just shed everything that I knew.
Any other tools or practices you want to share before we wrap up today?
Something that has really helped me is a new scientific therapy called lens therapy. From all the trauma that I've had, I've never once in my life have been to a therapist until 32, 33. And I have a big problem from all just survival mode of just not feeling anything. So she like hooks my brain up to like this little sensor thing, and it kind of tells you how your brain reacts to certain things. My brain's dead. Like I'm fully functioning on the outside, but I have no feeling. My brain does not react to anything traumatic, anything. It just doesn't react, has no reaction because it's protecting me. Your brain is like your biggest protector, really. We use lens therapy to kind of wake that up so that I can be feeling again and emotional, which obviously I am because I'm crying about these things that happen, but
Must be working.
yeah, it must be working. And I agreed to do this because my daughter has suffered with mental illness.
Sure.
And because I was so turned off emotionally, it was really doing her a disservice because she's a very emotionally needy person. Not needy sounds bad, but like she's much more emotionally intelligent than I am. So she really needed like a very touchy feely like mom, like coddly mom, and I'm not that. I was not that ever. So I remember the therapist one day, she said, if you don't do this for you, you need to do this for your daughter because she needs you. She needs your emotional responses. She needs your emotional feedback. She needs your like emotional support. And so I said, okay, I And my husband is actually surprisingly the same way. Like he's very similar to her in that regard. Like he needs a lot of physical touch, a lot of emotional reassurance. And so I had two relationships in my life that were suffering because my brain was just in protection mode, like dark mode. So I had agreed to do it, and it's been amazing. I was able to stop taking medication for anxiety and depression. And I've also started dreaming again, which I had not had dreams. I can't even tell you the last time I had a dream. I was probably a child. And I feel I'm more emotionally in tune to other people's feelings, and I'm able to show empathy to those people that need it, which I've never been able to do before.
I've never heard of lens therapy before.
It's amazing, and it works in different ways. So my sister from our family trauma is actually the opposite of me. So her brain goes too much. And so she's a very high anxiety. And so she does lens therapy to actually calm her brain down. So it can work in both ways depending on which areas of the brain you target.
So how did you learn about lens therapy?
Through my therapist. She suggested it solely just to really help my relationship with my daughter, to be there for her.
I think it's a great segue to entice people to come back for our third and final episode with Sarah, where we get to talk about Mandy's favorite thing,
Baboons!
So thanks so much for joining us, and thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing so deeply. Sarah, your resilience is inspiring. Thank you for sharing the challenges and tools that helped you find your way.
Join us for the final episode of Sarah's journey, where we talk about her boons. It's one you won't want to miss. Thank you for joining us on the Monomyth Diaries. If this episode resonates with you or someone you know, we'd love for you to share it and spread the inspiration.
Don't forget to follow us wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube to stay connected.
We'd appreciate it if you could take a moment and rate and review the podcast. It helps us reach more people with stories of transformation and growth.
You can visit us at monomythdiaries.com or text us directly from the show notes to reach out and keep the conversations going.
Until next time, heroes, let's journey together through our monomyths.